Welcome to Cool Explorations. I'm your host, Tony Peters. Today we're going to be speaking to Tyler Paul about his military career and what that has done to him mentally and emotionally, and his decision to get into music and how that's been a source of healing for him, and how God's really worked through this time to really bring about that healing. Welcome to Cool Explorations. I'm your host, Tony Peters. Today we have Tyler Paul on, and he is going to be talking a little bit about his military career as well as what he's doing now. And why don't you start off by introducing yourself and letting us know who you are?
All right, so obviously I'm Tyler, as you just mentioned, and I am currently active duty in the military here in the United States and on the bomb squad, or known as explosive ordnance disposal. I have just under 2 years left until retirement, so I've kind of started to switch my life into, I guess, more, for lack of a better term, of what it is that I'm wanting to do or what God's leading me to do, and I think it's the music realm. And so, teaching people. I'm a Guitars for Vets instructor as well. And so, that's basically, I have a wife and beautiful kids, and just, trying to get to where I could do what it is that focus on the family and God more, and try to bring people to Him as well.
Awesome. Yeah. And why don't you tell us your testimony, what your life was like before Christ and what it was like after Christ?
Oh yeah, that's always a very good one. Unfortunately, I wish I could go back and say that I lived a life where I was always trying to follow Christ. I think that's everybody's goal, and those are great testimonies. I grew up in Missouri. I lived in a regular mom, dad. I had a brother. Nice home. Didn't need anything, and so kind of tried to be the popular kid, go to the parties, things like that. Then after high school, that was shortly after the 9/11 happened, I decided, well, somebody from our family needs to go into the military. And so that was what I decided to do. Took a career in explosive ordnance disposal, and so that's put me on a few deployments, and seen a lot of different things on those deployments. And as I'm sure a lot of listeners are aware of, the certain jobs in the military realm, they kind of lead towards the more partying lifestyle, to take an edge off, a lot of drinking and stuff like that. And that's not to say all of them do, because you can't, say all or none. But some of them are just, I would say, more active in it than others. And, and that's probably because a lot of jobs see different things than a lot of other jobs. Typically in my job, you deal with a lot of explosions after the fact. You try to prevent them beforehand. And it's also who you work with. I've done a few deployments working with Special Operations Forces as their EOD team leader. So definitely a lot of more aggressive things in nature. And so I've loved every bit of it. Well, I shouldn't say every bit of it. There are certain things, hindsight 2020. But it's one of those things where for a while I'd grown up hearing about God, and but you never, I guess you kind of always have a invincibility complex about you at some points, and you think you don't need it, or the fact that you don't see stuff, then it's not really there, and so you just choose not to believe it, and honestly, knowing what I know now, you choose not to see what's actually straight in front of you. You say it's something else. For me, one of the big moments of my life was I met my wife. She was an absolutely amazing person, very devout Christian, follower of Jesus. And I say follower of Jesus because, I've kind of put those in a couple different baskets. Follower of Jesus to me is, what we're supposed to be. And so I still was, acting out, wanting to do in life what I wanted to do. And, it could have been from experiences in the military or not. That doesn't justify what I was doing in any way, shape, or form. But there was, she had put that seed in me because I couldn't turn it away because I wanted to be with her. So I had to, kind of, for a while, I guess I kind of played the game and stuff. And then Then came a deployment while I was dating her, and so it was to Afghanistan. And so during that deployment, there was one specific event. There was a lot of, I guess what you could call close calls, but there was one really specific event where I had done something, because during a deployment, especially in my job, you become familiar with the person who's trying to do damage to you, and it's kind of a game. They watch you, you figure out what they're doing, and stuff. So he had been watching me for a while, and we had ended up getting into a pretty action-packed scenario. And so I went and performed on a device exactly what should have set that device off, and would have taken me out of the game. And then, there's multiple other ones around as well. So I took that as, when that happened, because like I said, there's things that we know that are extremely simple to set up, and that's what that was. And like I said, I did it exactly how it was set up, and I could not see, it's still to this day, any reason why it didn't go off. But in my head, it goes back to that invincibility complex. It's like, oh man, I'm just, nothing could get me kind of a thing. And but in the back of my head, that seed was definitely there. And so finished deployment, came home, got married, still kind of struggled with wanting to drink. And it wasn't one of those things of, the signs were there. It wasn't like, okay, I can have one or two and, I'll be fine. It was when you start, you just don't stop until your body says stop. And so, I did that. And then it came to the point where I was probably going to lose my marriage. And so that was a pretty big turning point for me. It's still, all the signs kept saying, hey, I'm here. I'm the reason you're still alive. I'm the reason you haven't been arrested or, anything else. And so, kind of grown. And then I'd say about a year or two ago, I really felt something just change. And I don't know if it was the climate of society, of where it is or not, but because when I was younger, I did get saved. But it was kind of, like, oh, well, the kids are doing it kind of a thing. So you didn't really feel anything. And then for a long time, in that struggle that I was having, from deployments, from alcohol and everything, there was times where you would say, if you're real, let me know. Because that seed was there, but you'd always choose not to hear it. And so finally, one day, it hit, and I just felt different, because you'd always hear, people talk about the Holy Spirit comes into you, and I had never felt that. And so when I tried to get into Christianity, I didn't feel it, so it didn't, it turned off. But then that one day happened, and it just drastically changed everything. I felt the Holy Spirit. When something happened, I'd simply pray, or when a stressful situation comes up, or something doesn't go my way, everything was a lot more simple, because I knew that there was a reason for it. I had something to fall back on. And, a lot of people come up with the questions of, why would you want to do that? Christianity's not fun and stuff. And I was one of those people for a long time. My idea of fun was hazardous to my health. And so, and it's the same for a lot of other people. But then when the Holy Spirit comes into you, you realize it is fun, and you have a whole lot less stress to worry about in life, because you're not trying to do everything on your own. And you have somebody to actually help you through everything. So after that moment, I'd always kind of been really into music. So a while ago, I decided to pursue a degree in music. And so I've been doing that, avid guitar player. And I'm looking to, with retirement coming up, teach lessons, use music as a means to bring people to Christ, and not necessarily in your hymnal type music. Everything has its time and place, but more of, I think young people today are being attacked more than anything. And I mean, it's a good strategy, because you hear the saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, then forget about the old dog. Let's go to the young, because you can teach them. And so it's a very well thought out strategy, and it's one of those things where being in the military, you kind of think strategic on everything. And so it's like, what would be the best way? We need to, if they're performing this offense, we need to do a counter offense over here, kind of a thing. And so, it's kind of, I'm leading my life that way. I'm closing out my career, hopefully bringing other people to Christ, because, I talk to a lot of old buddies in the job field, and if, they were to see me now, or they start talking to me as if I was the old me, because they used to call me Crazy Paul, and so it's kind of a surprise, that I've drastically just changed my life, and it's a lot more simple to change than it was, especially with the drinking aspect. A while, because you'd go a while and it's like, okay, yeah, I don't need it, but then you'd end up doing it again. And so you always had it, Satan's very good about being like, oh, you're good. You're saying you're not doing it, whatever. And then, it gets to be a while and you're like, yeah, I am doing good. I think I could have a couple, and Satan's like, yeah, absolutely. You can have a couple, you deserve it. And then it just, drops off the edge right there. So, that's one thing that really also amazed me, was when I felt the Holy Spirit come into me and change me. One, I wanted to do more. But the other big thing was it just made everything simple to say no. It made life got simple. Life slowed down. And it just gave me the urge to go out and do more for Christ, because he did everything for us. And, and it's definitely very much appreciated that I went through that. I would have, like I said, I would have rather, have a testimony of, I tried to follow Christ my entire life, but that didn't happen. So I can only do what I can do now about it, and that's try to reach as many people as possible. And whether it's through, YouTube channels I hope to start, or guitar lessons I teach, I basically want to use music because you could use music as an emotional realm to get people ready, but also to show them, that you could use music in so many different ways to prep you to hear the word, or, to express yourself, and to, get out those demons that may be inside you, or whatever the case is. So I know I've kind of rambled here a little bit and gone back and forth. So I'd say that's me as a whole, right, and where I'm at right now.
Yeah, and music is very therapeutic. I find it a great release for myself. Even now, dealing with a lot of the trauma that I've had in my past, it's a great way to get it out, and even to work through different issues and challenges that you have in your Christian walk. I've done a song that was called "Forgive Me, Lord." I'm working on it right now, actually. And so it just kind of goes over like the doubt in your mind, and the different emotions that come along with that, the challenges, the struggles, and so music definitely is very therapeutic. And is that kind of what you do with the guitar for vets? Is that kind of what you're working at there?
So yes, Guitar for Vets is for vets who do suffer from PTSD or other experiences that were caused in the military. And basically they get approved through the VA, who then recommends them to Guitars for Vets. And they get a guitar to practice with, and then at the end we do 10 one-hour sessions with them. At the end of those 10 one-hour sessions, they get a very nice acoustic guitar that they can keep for the rest of their life. And I did it because, one, it's kind of a vet talking to a vet kind of a thing, so it's a little different. I mean, we don't go into problems that they have or anything like that. If it comes up, then of course I could talk to them about it, because a lot of the stuff could be similar. But we basically just use music as a form of, one, getting it to where you have something to do when those thoughts are in your head, because especially learning a new instrument will clear your mind, because you have to focus specifically on that one thing, but also the music itself. And it's a lot better way to express yourself than trying to self-medicate yourself, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I've had on PTSD Foundation of America as well, and they deal with like Camp Hope program and that kind of stuff for war veterans and the PTSD that they do suffer with. So I think that is a very important role to play because a lot of them feel like they don't get the support that they need when they do retire. So I think it's important to have programs like that, and I don't say that to put anything against the VA because the VA is doing what they're able to. It's a lot more political than more than anything. So I think it's important to have these programs in place to help them because dealing with PTSD myself, I know how hard it is to process and come to grips with a lot of that stuff. I'm at a point now where I can talk about it. I'm fine with that kind of stuff. That's not to say it doesn't bother me because PTSD never really goes away. But faith has definitely been one of those things, and writing lyrics has been one of those things that's really just brought healing. So I can see guitar being that same kind of healing. So I love that you're involved with that, and I love that the VA has something like that going on.
Absolutely, yes. So do I. It's a good program, and yeah, like you're saying, we won't get into the VA as a whole, but there is, it's provides something for them, and they get stuff out of it, an instrument and music knowledge as well. So it is an avenue.
Yeah. So with your own career, how has that affected you mentally and emotionally? Uh, is there any PTSD going on in your own mind or?
Well, so I've talked to counselors and things, and they do diagnosis. They call stuff traumatic, and I try and get them to change the word to experience. I call it life experience, and but I'd say you for me typically. Well, I shouldn't say for me, but for me, I didn't notice anything. I just thought you're becoming what you're supposed to be, and what that was basically non-emotional, really, not compassionate, no empathy, really. If something happened to somebody, especially if, take for example, my wife was to tell me like some older person had passed away, which this is going to sound terrible. It's extremely sad, but for me it was, well, they lived a life, kind of a thing. And that's, not exactly the best way to come back to your wife about something. So you become distant. You don't show emotions, and it affects your family. And you also don't talk about things. So if something gets brought up about work, it's just quick to kind of shut it off and not discuss it. And so you hold all these things in, but I think one of the big issues with it is you hold all this stuff in, but then it takes something small to let it come out, and then when it comes out, it's kind of like a waterfall or a dam breaking. Everything just comes out, and you show that to whoever offended you. If you, in case of if it's your kids acting, like kids, which you might think is crazy, then you raise your voice, or and it's just not what you want to be, not who you want to show, especially to your kids. And so yeah, there's definitely a lot of factors there. And like I was saying earlier, when it happens, or your wife tells you, well, you're not emotional, you're not sympathetic, you think, well, that's because that's who I am now. That's what I'm supposed to be. That's what the world has shaped me into, and it's done it for a reason. And you take this perception of normal, and you think, well, I'm just a normal person now. This is what I'm supposed to be. And then you talk to other people like counselors and everything, and they're like, well, that train of thought's not exactly, they don't use the word normal because there is no normal, but they're like, that train of thought's not, exactly the way it should be, especially, because if they ask, give scenarios of, well, if this was to happen to you or stuff, and obviously your initial answers are aggression. If somebody was to, do something to you, everything's answered with kind of an aggressive manner because that's what works in certain environments and that's what people know, or fear. So it's a definitely something that for me I didn't notice. I just thought it was supposed to be. For my family, they did notice, and it's hard to get close whenever you don't talk about certain things. And there's a lot of reasons you don't talk. One, because you don't want to think about it. Two, because you don't want them to think a certain way about you because of things that you may have caused. And so it's a definitely tricky situation, and it is good where when you talk to counselors, there's one thing that's very good about, I will say, the military while you're still active is they do give you avenues to go talk, because talking to other military members, you're kind of, especially in the same job field, you're kind of just going to be like, well, yeah, they deserve that, or and you're just going to kind of feed off each other because that's the mentality you have.
It's the
And
culture.
exactly. And then when you're put in a certain scenarios, there's certain scenarios you can be put in where it's absolutely terrifying at first. And, at first it's terrifying. About the fifth time, it's kind of like, oh, okay, what, it's normal. And then several times after that, it's you kind of, you want it to happen. The adrenaline
Mm.
starts to kick in, and then you come home, and I'd be willing to say I'm not a doctor, but it seems like it kind of changes your DNA in a sense because you've been up here, and now you get home, and that up here is never happening. So you then are looking for ways to get up there, but there's only one way to get to that level, and you can't do it through any other means. So you start to then it can affect you monetarily because you start to buy, mountain bikes, all kinds of other things, and you get a mountain bike and you go try to just start jumping right off the bat, and because you want to get that excitement, and and it affects monetarily. Then it can affect you physically as well because going to jump without really being trained on jumping, things can happen. So there's definitely a lot of different ways that it manifests itself, and it just takes, you got to listen to people. For me, it was listening to my wife, and then kind of then you put it in perspective with people. Well, why do people call you Crazy Paul? And then you start to think about things, and you're like, well, okay, so I'll go talk to somebody, and then it kind of helps lighten it up, and so yeah. To answer your question, there is definitely things there that are worked on, and I'd say since trying to work on it, I'd say my relationship's gotten better, but also without having somebody to fall back onto, being Jesus, then it would be a whole lot more difficult because beforehand, I never thought about it. It was, well, I'll just have some drinks and pass out and wake up
Right.
tomorrow and start again. And that's no way to live your life. It's unhealthy, and it's self-destructive, honestly. And
Yeah.
it's something that you're not getting better at, but you're making yourself worse, even though you think, well, I can do this. It's legal. Whatever the case, whatever goes through your head, people justify it. Well, today ends in a Y or whatever. They justify it however they can, and it's a very serious issue, but it's also an issue that people need to take the time to understand because it comes in a lot of different forms and from a lot of different things. It doesn't have to just be, combat situations. There's a lot of things in this world that can mentally affect somebody, and for most time, like I was saying, it's hidden, um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you need something to kind of show you.
Yeah, and it's why I have so much respect for the people in uniform, whether it's police, Coast Guard, firefighters, military. I have so much respect for them because of what they go through, so that we don't have to go through it, and to protect us and give us our freedom, that we love and hold so dear here in North America, and in many parts of Europe. It's it does take a lot out of you, and I really liked the Christian filmmaker Eric Christensen that I had just had on because he did a film about military people when they're coming home, and how God was involved in that healing process, how PTSD had basically destroyed their lives until God came into their lives and was able to bring about that healing. They were willing to accept that. So it is something that I do hold a lot of high regard for people in uniform and all that they go through. Partially because I do understand PTSD. I understand what it's like. Um, and I don't think you can go through all those situations and not have it affect you somehow mentally and rewire your brain. And when you come home, you do have to rewire your brain, just like counselors had to help me rewire my brain, so that it was able to understand and actually come to grips and come to a point where I could actually talk about it. And that point where I feel like God has worked enough to bring about that healing into my life.
Yeah, and a lot of people think that it is PTSD or experiences or whatever the case is just you're yelling in your dreams or you're yelling in your sleep, and they think that's what it is, and it's really I know for me, and it's probably different for many people who have it. It'd probably be different for you as well. Is you lose what makes you a human. You're not having nightmares. You're not. I mean, you just may not dream. Period. But a lot of people, like I was saying, just they assume that it's just oh, they're gonna snap and do something crazy, and that's it's just not the case. It's humanity. That human part of you is gradually just kind of dampens itself.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, it takes a lot of different faces. I know for me, it was the dampening effect, emotions, for caring about different people. Because for a while, if I didn't know somebody, honestly, I wouldn't have cared. If something would have happened right, in front, I'd be like, oh man, well, that stinks, kind of a thing, and
Yeah.
and that would be it, which is not as humans the way we should be, but it's
Yeah.
kind of what you become.
Yeah, I know for me, it definitely was flashbacks. And I would have them during the day, I'd have them at night. But even now, I really have to watch my anger, because anger is a huge part of PTSD and that kind of stuff. And when my kids are crying about things that I don't think they should be crying about, I do get really angry really quickly. So I let my wife deal with it, generally, because it's just. I really struggle with listening to that, and so it just it's a trigger, and I know it's a trigger. So it's something I've been working on, and I'm still working on. God is really working on that in me, to deal with that. Uh, but my wife understands as well, and so a lot of that is the family support. And did you find your family support was has helped you with a lot of that stuff?
Yeah, the family support. I will say that my family is absolutely amazing, in all aspects. I'd say the issue that I ran into was trusting that. Like I was talking about, wanting to utilize that, not wanting to accept their help, and like I was saying earlier, a lot of it was because this is who I am. There's nothing wrong with that. This is where I'm supposed to be. So you didn't think you needed it, and it's still hard these days to talk about anything, and you relate a lot of different things. I know for me it was normal because I'd always take things and look back at the guys who were in World War II, and you're like, well, look at the stuff they went through. What
Yeah.
I've done absolutely nothing, and so it takes people to say, well, you don't need to relate it to certain things, but going back to the family thing, yeah, the family was definitely always there, very supportive. It's just I think the hard part is utilizing them and just trusting yourself to kind of let go. And it's still a struggle. It's always going to be a struggle, but it's definitely a work in progress. So I've been very fortunate and had a family that has always been there for me. Whether it's my parents, my wife. My wife, I mean, she's got to be a saint. She's still married to me, so that says a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I could say the same. Yeah. So you've also we talked about music before. How did you decide to go into that avenue for yourself?
Well, for me, it was like I said earlier. I've always loved music. High school garage band when I was younger, stuff like that. And then I finally started thinking one thing about the military is they will help with college. And so I had gotten an associate's degree in criminal justice. Never going to use that because when I decided when I retire, I want to do, I don't want to spend time away from the kids anymore. I don't want to leave the wife anymore. I don't want to do anything like that. So I was like, well, I still got some time left. Why don't I do a degree that I really love, which is music, and then I can understand because you can play music. That's one thing, but truly going in and understanding it adds a whole new dynamic to it, and it's just it's a world that can keep you involved because you're always going to have things to think about. You're never going to know everything, and you can just keep learning. And the fact of the power that music has on people, even going back to, the antiquity times, medieval times, how the churches brought it in and everything. It's just, it's always been a way of reaching people. And obviously with that, you can reach people for the positive or you can reach people for the negative. Music is absolutely that powerful. So there's plenty of negative music out there. And, I think looking back on it, this kind of stemmed back from when I felt the Holy Spirit was people have always talked about gifts. And so you sit there before having known anything and you kind of think, well, the gifts are obviously what's in my head. I'm just going to go with whatever those are. And so you're like, well, that's why it's in my head. But once I felt the Holy Spirit, it kind of started forming in me. It's like, hey, you love music, you play music. Let's work that. And not only that, but certain things started to fall in place that would have absolutely never fallen in place. And that's with certain things I've done with trials, running for music software trials, and just meeting different people, and it feels natural. You're not fighting it. You're not trying to force it to become. And I think it's also one of those things as well. It felt comfortable because with retirement, it's like, well, I don't have to do something. I'll be able to take care of the family. And, it's not about retiring and be like, oh man, I want to become a millionaire. I want to be able to take care of the family. But the bigger thing is, reaching people that need to be reached, which is no shortage of that. And also, taking care of the family as well. And so music was definitely one of those things where I can help people as much as I possibly can. I can teach people it as well, and just it's just such an amazing vessel that can be used in so many different ways. And it's like I said earlier, it can be used positive or it can be negative. So I think we need a lot more of the positive in the world to fight the darkness that's trying to creep in.
Yeah, and that's why I love bands like For King and Country, Chris Tomlin, and Matt Redman. I think they do a lot of that positive music and music that has a lot of meaning
Hmm.
behind it.
Yeah, I will say I lean hard rock, metal, realm, melodic metal, not the screaming. Like I said, I don't have anything against any kinds of music. It's just personal taste. But I will say there's a band called, everybody thinks, well, if you play metal, it has to be all down and, and everything like that. And that's an assumption and not true. It's, there's a band called Theocracy who is hard, but they are extremely biblical driven. And, so that's kind of the realm I'm wanting to get into is, get people moving, but it's a positive biblical message that comes out of it, which is, if you take people's thoughts on music, that seem almost kind of opposites of each other. But I think, there is people that do blend them together well, and that's kind of the goal I would have as well. And it also shows people that being a Christian isn't boring. I think, a lot of people feel that, and honestly, a lot of it comes from the way people talk about the church. They feel like, well, if I'm going to be a Christian, I might as well just put myself in a prison cell, and I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, and then it's just all boring. And that's, I would venture to say that from what I've seen, Christians have more fun than anybody, and there's a lot less repercussions for the fun they have. So, that's kind of
Yeah.
how I see it.
Yeah, well, and I mean, yeah, you go to a praise service or a worship service, and those are actually a lot of fun, and it can feel very empowering when you're actually in those sermon services. And other bands that I think are a little closer to what your style is would probably be bands like Skillet or
Mm.
POD. And I used to really enjoy POD back in the day. And Skillet, my son, that's one of his favorite bands is Skillet. I really love some of the music that they put out.
Oh yeah, I'm still waiting to meet John Cooper someday. But no, yeah, I love Skillet too, and I think there's a massive place for bands like that are playing in the mainstream as well. Like I was saying, everything has its place and purpose, and I think because I'll say you get these arguments all the time of, well, God wouldn't want that music, Jesus wouldn't want that music, or whatever. Or, they're out here playing with these people, and it's like, what? Okay, do you think Jesus just spent his time in the church? Is that all he did while he was here? Or did he go talk to people that needed it? So you have to, I don't want to use the word infiltrate because people would, term that as a negative term, but it's kind of fitting. You got to be out there. And if you want to reach people, you got to be in those environments. And obviously, with being in those environments, you have to definitely watch how you're acting and how you're representing yourself, because you're representing God in everything you do.
Yeah.
So, if you're going to be in that environment, you got to hold yourself to the higher standards, and definitely show the reason that you're doing what you're doing. But it's definitely a big thing for me. I love seeing bands doing that. It's because we got to reach people that are in those rooms, because there's a lot of that negative stuff that goes on in those environments.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I always like to leave off with one piece of advice as well. And the piece of advice I'd ask you for is, what advice would you have for men and women in uniform who are really struggling with the mental side of their deployment or their job?
Yeah, that's a very good one. Man, I would say a lot of it. Biggest advice I have is to get an outside perspective, because as we talked about earlier, family is great. You have your family to help out, but an outside perspective, and it could be a counselor or somebody who's never been in the military, whichever. Preferably not somebody in the military, but an outside perspective on. Because, like I was saying with me, this is normal. Not caring what happens to somebody is normal. If they're outside of my family, who cares? That's the way I'm supposed to be. But getting that outside perspective, saying, "Oh, that thought process, that's negative on yourself. It's self-destructive. It can lead you down to these other thoughts." I'd say that's the biggest thing, and it's not a matter of thinking you need it, but more of just kind of a checks and balances. Just if something happened, or just go talk to somebody else. Be proactive with it, because once you get reactive with it, it's chances are that DNA I was telling you about that could change is already kind of set in. So now you're making it a lot more difficult to deal with. So if that was it, that would be just talk to somebody, get a perspective outside. If I would definitely, of course, the perfect world would be, talk to God about it, talk to other believers about it, or if you don't believe, just talk to somebody who does believe, see what they think, and see if it does kind of ring a bell with you as well, because there's nothing better than not having to worry about something, or having somebody who to fall back on, who's given their life for me. That's amazing, but the reality is not everybody in the military wants to hear that route yet, and and they need to be reached. But for the ones that definitely don't, just talk to somebody, an outside perspective, somebody preferably who's trained in it, because what you think is normal is not a, I guess, a civilian way of being in a society, an intellectual society or whatever. That's not the proper way to think of things, and so in that case, you are the different one, and it's not healthy. So that's really the best advice. Be proactive with it. Don't wait until people start to notice something in you. Just talk to somebody beforehand, so that way you don't start too late in the game. Would be really my best advice.
Yeah, and that's great advice. Thank you for coming on, and thank you for your service. I again really have a lot of respect for anybody in uniform.
Oh, thank you. It's been my pleasure. It's been a real neat experience, and I hope I put out some stuff that can help somebody somewhere.
Thank you for listening to Cool Explorations. You've just been listening to Tyler Paul speaking about his time in the military and how that really affected him mentally, and how God has used music to bring about healing, and what he plans to do with his music going forward. If you would like to reach me for any reason, you can do so at tpeters745@gmail.com.